Hi. So today I want to talk about how to do a pitch deck, how to get it right, and when investing. Before you go ahead and do your pitch deck, do consider, is investment right for you? If it's right for you, what kind of investor do you actually want? Is it someone who will help you in the business, who knows about your business? It already knows about the industry, can help you in various ways, or is it someone who will just give you money and not be involved further? And make sure you get along with them so that you won't run into issues in ideally with that. Um, and also when you have an agreement for how they'll take a share of the company, be aware of how much of the company that they are getting, and which kind of shares, dilution or otherwise, they're getting, so that later on you'll be protected against losing more of your company if that's not something you really want to happen. Yes, so if you've decided that going for investment is right for you, then yeah, let's look at how you can do a great pitch deck that investors will be interested in, on your business idea, early stage business. So typically what happens with the early stage founders is that um, their pitch deck will tend to go into great detail about the product itself, what kind of product it is, what it does, and how it does it, and how you made it, and all these wonderful things about the product. And that's understandable because you've usually spent all day every day working on it and you're super interested in it. So it would make sense that you would feel like talking about this product is everything, but not everybody looking at it that way, and certainly not investors. An example of this is that um, I came across I was working with actually a medical imaging company who it's the early stage. They've not yet built their product, but they have this concept and they know how to make it. Um, it will allow it will allow doctors to look into patients in a whole new way. And I can't go into detail about the product, but it would bypass the need to use X-rays, and it sounds like an absolutely brilliant possible business. But their pitch deck just gave some societal background for how it could be used, and then it went right into a breakdown of the technology based on the physics of optics about how this product works. And that just did not cover anything that a pitch deck needs to cover. And these are very smart people. So, often the smartest people are getting the pitch decks the most wrong because they just know so much detail. The founders felt that what they put in the pitch deck was really a summary of of the topic, and it wasn't entirely going into detail. But that was only because in comparison to the scientific papers that they were publishing in journals, it wasn't going into detail. But for a pitch deck, it was still going into much more detail than is ideal for a nice, succinct, to the point pitch deck of what investors are looking for. So you're not supposed to focus on the product and how you make it by any means. What you need to do is pitch the business. Pitch the business, not the product. Business is made up of various aspects. It could be marketing, sales, finance. It could be the technology of how it's built. Could be supply chain. All these different aspects make up a business, and the product is just one part of a whole business system. So you have to be aware of what the components of your business are. These calls representing different aspects. Most businesses will have a lot of the same things like marketing, sales, but some businesses don't have supply chain, for example, while other businesses, supply chain is a huge part of it. You have to be aware of which components are really important for your business and show that you know which components make up the overall business, not the product, but the overall business. What components are important for your business that will allow you to run it successfully? That's what an investor overall needs to know. They don't necessarily need to know all the details of all that, but they need to know that you seem to know. So again, to go back to which problem are you solving, that's one of the key things you need to start with in a pitch deck. Which problem are you solving? And be aware of the target market that you are solving it for. Is there actually a problem in the market that you want to solve, or is it more that you've created a product that you like and you wouldn't even use it, but you just want to create it and then see if there's a market? No, if you're doing that, then you're not solving a business problem. That actually brings to mind an example of a founder I spoke to recently, whom I spoke to him about his pitch deck, and as he was a designer, background with him was a designer, he had this really lovely pitch deck. It was beautifully designed, probably the most beautifully designed pitch deck I've ever seen. The format and the font, the way the pictures look, everything was wonderful in that way, but the content was completely not what an investor would need, but he made it look absolutely wonderful in terms of the design. So what he was working on was a new way of generating electricity from the movement of the wind. Now that, of course, to me sounded really really promising. Sounds promising, doesn't it? A new way of generating electricity from the movement of the wind, a new form of windmills that was more aesthetic and takes up less space. Sounds great. So he spent months and months engrossed in the building of this product. He'd drawn diagrams, and he'd worked in manufacturing workshops, and he kept going over this product every day for months and months, which actually turned into years. And eventually what was happening was that by the time I spoke to him, he had morphed his product into a miniature fine metal windmill for coffee tables. So he now had this product which I really struggled to see the market for, but this was the product that he wanted to launch. So this was something I couldn't easily see a market for, because a windmill needs to be in a place where there's a lot of wind. This product he had created needed a place with a lot of air flowing fast past it. And so typically it would need to be on something like a mountaintop, and coffee tables sitting on places where there's a lot of air blowing past was not something that, that as far as I'm aware, exists in this world very much. So I didn't really see the market. But that said, don't forget that back in the 1970s, there was an advertising executive called Gary Dahl, and he came up with the idea of just selling rocks. He made them into pet rocks, and it took off. He sold it. People will still buy pet rocks even today, but at that time it was very, very popular to buy a pet rock. So yes, anything potentially could be possible. You really never know what might work. That said, investors generally are looking for something that is more like it seems to have a clear target market that really exists. So bear that in mind. Who is the target market? So which problem are you solving? Who are you solving it for? Founders struggle with this question a lot more than you might think. Just a little while ago, I spoke to a founder who was working on a problem to solve an issue that's in the pharmaceutical devices industry. And this product could change the way that they do their paperwork and make the whole process much more efficient. So in that industry, when you're making one small change to a product, you have to create a whole new set of documentation every time you make a new version, a small change, or certainly when you make a new product, but even when you make a small change to a product that you have to do a lot of documentation, and that documentation can take 2 days, and typically it does take 2 days just to do that. So he was creating a product that would work in much less, that could allow that documentation to be done in a lot less time, and they would, usually there would be in a pharmaceutical devices company, there would be teams of people employed just to do this job of creating documentation. And he said that he was making changes that would allow one changes in one part of the document to flow throughout the document, because usually that doesn't happen, and therefore lots of manual changes are needed, and people usually copy and paste, and then it ends up not being as accurate as the document needs to be, and people are used to Word documents, so they don't want to change that. And then um, when I asked some further questions, he said that it's all about modularizing the process. I was just trying to find out what problem is this new product going to solve? And these were the kinds of answers I was getting. So based on what I've just said, do you have clarity on what problem he was solving? What do you think the problem is that he was solving? Well, the problem he was solving was he was reducing the time taken to complete pharmaceutical device documents from over 2 days to 10 minutes. That was all that he was doing. And yeah, well, there's lots of other ways you could put that, and there's other aspects you could other perspectives you can look at it from. But if we're trying to simplify it a lot, this is how you can say that this problem can be solved. So this also brings up the point of knowing the difference between who when you say who you're solving, what you're doing is solving a problem. Who are you solving that problem for is also a key thing to be aware of. And when you start thinking of that, it's important to know the difference between an end user and a customer. They're not always the same thing. For example, in this case where we're talking about the pharmaceutical devices, the end user would be the people employed to do the documentation. However, they're not the people that would actually be the customers, because they don't think they have a problem, they think they have a job. And in a medium-sized company, there may be a team of 20 or more people employed just to do this sort of documentation. The people that would use this product are those people, but the people who would buy the product are the owners or the executives of the pharmaceutical company, who want to reduce the time taken for that work by a lot and save money and manpower on completing this work. So the end user is those employees, but the customer is someone else. And a very obvious example where the customer and the end user are different is in the case of products designed for toddlers. If you make products designed for toddlers, you're very well aware that the people buying your products will not be the toddlers, they will be the parents of the toddlers. So be aware that the product users and the actual clients can be different people. And when you think about it like that, you may realize that there's different markets you haven't thought of, or you'll get some clarity about who's actually your market, your target market. And when you think about this, you'll also perhaps come across some other ideas about other markets that you haven't thought of, because it's just a slightly different way of, it's a question that can bring up some other answers for you if you think about it for a while. So again, it's not about saying why someone should buy your product. That's not what a pitch deck does. But why why is it so difficult for founders to answer this question of what problem are you solving? And I think this generally comes down to the over focus on their product. Very often they have an over focus on the product, but on the brilliance of their product and why someone should buy it. And so they're trying to sell the product. Now, if you approach your pitch deck with the idea of trying to sell your product, and you try to answer the question of what problem does my product solve, you'll find that what you end up with is a list of sales objections, and sales objections can be really useful to have. But they're not so useful for your pitch deck. They are useful for your um, sales. So if you're producing a sales presentation or going into sales in one way or another, great, this is where that could be useful. But for the pitch deck, that's not what you need. Okay, so you need to know what problem you're solving and answer that clearly. And then the rest of the pitch you simply demonstrate not so much how you'll do it, but that you can do it. You need to show that you understand the key aspects of your business, the market, and really yourself. It's important that if, like most people, you have strengths in one area and less so in another, that you recognize where you're strong and where you're not, and then work to develop where you have some weaknesses, and as well as improving on your strengths. And when you're really aware of your strengths and weaknesses, then ideally you would bring in other people to work with you, and they would have complementary strengths, and that would help you to build a robust team. And in order to do that, you really have to be aware of where your strengths and weaknesses lie. Otherwise, you're going to end up with potentially all the people having the same strengths, and instead of complementary ones. So try to be aware of what your strengths and weaknesses are, and what your team's strengths and weaknesses are. That will help you to build a robust team. One person founded companies are less popular with investors, not just because of the strengths that more people can bring to a team, but also just the whole reliance of the company on one person is risky. Something happens to that person, if they just go away, the whole business could just grind to a halt. So building a team of 3 or 4 people who you trust and have complementary strengths would be ideal. Like if you're really good in technical things, it might be good to have other people on your founding team that are also good at technical things, but somebody needs to be good at something other than that as well. Sales is almost always a really, really important part of every business. And generally the CEO, the person that's basically being the CEO for the business, they should be good at sales. But they shouldn't only be good at sales. I've come across people who are good at sales and running, and they try to run a business, but they don't understand the other aspects of the business. They're simply good at sales. I once worked with a founder who was really good at sales. He was a salesman, and he had a product that he'd invented. It was quite a simple product. It was a product for golfers, and he was a salesman. It wasn't highly technical, but this product was just something a little bit different, and it was a nice novelty for keen golfers like he was. And he even managed to get a patent on it. It wasn't a very robust patent, but he did get one, and he was keen to sell this product, and he did sell it. He sold everywhere he went, and he sold quite a good number of them. But he really wasn't aware of the other aspects that make up a business. He just had his product and he had his ability to sell. And so actually when he spoke to potential investors, he would just answer every question with why people should buy his product, and showed that he did not really understand that the business is made up of a lot of different components that are all really important. And ultimately, the business didn't grow beyond him selling from his car book. There was no real growth in the business later because of that. So it's important that your deck shows in a succinct way that you understand your business and how to make it successful. Every business is different, and there are some aspects that will be really important in one business that are much less important in another. And you need to know which ones are important for yours and make sure that your pitch deck demonstrates that. And the pitch deck need not do much more than that. That's pretty much all it needs to do. The outcome of a great pitch deck is that you'll be getting into a series of conversations with an interested investor. If they're interested, they'll ask you more questions. And during that time, you can talk more about what you do and how you do it if they ask you those questions. So if you start with a great pitch deck, those conversations are much more likely to happen. And then you can get your diary filled with great investor meetings and go ahead and get investment from the right person. So if you'd like to be in touch, these are my contact details, and I really hope this presentation was interesting and helpful for you today.